Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So last episode I did a response to Claudia Brown, who some of you may know better as Ranting Feminist, as she was known for some time. And in that video I covered a number of topics, two of which were male suicide and the disproportionate amount of money that prostate cancer gets as opposed to breast cancer. And those two cancers are very, very comparable. They have a very similar rate of people getting the cancers. They have a very similar recovery rate, and they have a very similar death rate. But the one thing they do not have in common is the amount of money spent on them. And I'm going to be covering those three things again in this video. So in a sense, this is kind of a follow-up video, but most of the material will be brand new. Claudia left some comments to some of my subscribers who commented on her video, and I want to go through those comments and have a closer look at them. And I also want to go back to Rational Wiki, because I haven't done an episode on them for a while, and their men's rights entry. And I want to cover male suicide and healthcare and life expectancy. Now, if you haven't seen last episode, it doesn't really matter. I think you'll pick up any references that I have to that episode, although it doesn't hurt if you have. So without any further delay, let's get stuck into it. So let's start with Rational Wiki and their entry on the men's rights movement. Now, it's been a while since I've done an episode on this, so if you can't remember what was going on, they've got a list of men's rights issues, and on one side they supposedly got what MRAs believe, which isn't always accurate, as you might imagine. And then on the other side it's got the explanation trying to diminish and dismiss those issues any fucking way they can. So let's start with suicide, and according to them, many MRAs point to the much higher worldwide suicide rate amongst men than amongst women, as an example of inequality, though, like the above, this is rarely directly attributed to feminism itself. Well, this is a complex issue, and I would say that very small blurb isn't entirely accurate. I would say the high male suicide rate is the end result of a lot of men's issues which aren't resolved and are the product of inequality. The family court system is the perfect example of that. But by no means is that the only issue. And of course, I would say in most cases, feminism is not to blame for the high male suicide rate, although there are examples of feminists standing in our way. And one of the things that feminists do to stand in our way is they constantly try to diminish and dismiss men's issues, including the high male suicide rate. And in fact, we saw that last video when Claudia seemed to be more concerned about women attempting suicide than men who have actually died from suicide. And this is very, very typical. It really was no surprise at all. So let's have a look at Rational Wiki's explanation of the high male suicide rate in their attempt to diminish and dismiss men's rights issues any fucking way they can. It says, at least in the United States, there is an easy, gruesome, and sad explanation for this. As womenshealth.gov writes, although more women than men attempt suicide, yeah, that's actually incorrect, but it continues, men are almost 4 times more likely than women to die by suicide. One reason is that men are more likely to use deadlier means, such as firearms, when they set out to take their own lives. So, probably the most common way feminists try to diminish and dismiss male suicide is by bringing up the argument that women attempt it more, because apparently that should be the main focus, right? Now, I want you to think about something for a minute. When MRAs talk about male suicide, we're told that more women attempt it, so therefore that's the main focus. In other words, they're putting numbers before severity, because obviously dying is more severe than attempting and failing. But when MRAs talk about genital mutilation, we find the exact opposite. You see, there are more males circumcised than females in the world. So using feminist logic when it comes to suicide, male circumcision should be the main focus, right? Because it's affecting more men than women. But we're told in that scenario that female genital mutilation is far more severe, so that should be the focus. So in that case, severity is more important than numbers. So it seems there's no consistency when it comes to feminists diminishing and dismissing men's issues. Now, logically, we should be able to talk about males committing suicide and the women and also men who attempt and fail. These are both topics we should be able to talk about. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to talk about the men, because when we bring that up, what we get is derailing tactics from feminists. And we should be able to talk about both female genital mutilation and male genital mutilation. But unfortunately, every time we bring up male genital mutilation, it's diminished and dismissed as not being as bad, therefore not a real topic. And we even get this from feminists who are against it. They say, sure, it's a violation of human rights, but, you know, the women's have it worse. So therefore, that should be our only focus. When in reality, we should be able to talk about both. I don't see any reason why everyone who's against female genital mutilation can't also be against male genital mutilation, and vice versa. Can't we just say, leave the genitals of newborn babies, be they male or female, alone? That simple. But apparently it has to be a competition, and women always have it worse, so, you know, the men's issues have to be dismissed. But let's once again tackle this very, very common derailing tactic of more women than men attempt suicide. Now, as I pointed out last episode, there is no complete count kept of suicide attempts in the US. However, each year the CDC gathers data from hospitals on non-fatal injuries from self-harm, as well as survey data. So we are unable to distinguish between self-harm and suicide attempts. Therefore, we can't say that more women attempt suicide than men. However, the graphic I used in my last video comes from a website which has since been updated. Now, the information I presented last video is still accurate, but there is some more information here, and I think it's only fair that we have a look at it. So it goes on to say, based on the 2016 National Survey of Drug Use and Mental Health, it is estimated that 0.5% of the adults aged 18 or older made at least one suicide attempt. This translates to approximately 1.3 million adults. Adult females reported a suicide attempt 1.2 times as often as males. Further breakdown by gender and race are not available. 1.2 times as often as males, based on a survey. That is not a significant number. That means for every 100 males who have attempted suicide and failed, there are 120 females who have attempted suicide and failed. And that is assuming that the survey is correct. I suspect that males are less likely to admit to attempting suicide. If you take that into account, that incredibly close number becomes even closer. Now, it does have some information on another survey. This is the Youth Risk Behaviour Survey, and it focuses on grades 9 to 12, and it says here that girls attempt it twice as often as boys. So in that particular age bracket, which is a very small scope we're looking at, girls are twice as likely as boys. Okay, so let's go back to Rational Wiki and see what they've got to say next. Where women tend to use more knives and pills, which fail quite often, men tend to use more guns and bridges, which don't fail nearly as often. This doesn't mean people shouldn't push for reducing suicidal men from either painting the ceiling red or driving off into something cushioning ability of asphalt. Hold on, let me read that again. Or driving off into something the cushioning ability of asphalt. This is very poorly written, by the way. I don't know what standards Rational Wiki has, but it sounds like it's been written by a 15-year-old from Tumblr. And I kind of suspect that that's actually what's happened. Need I point out that this isn't very compassionate, joking about painting the ceiling red or driving into something with the cushioning ability of asphalt is not very compassionate if you're trying to explain that feminists actually do care about men's issues and MRAs have it wrong. Yeah. It goes on to say, but rather this isn't a rights issue so much as a tragic phenomenon that should be reduced. Okay. Yes, technically it's not a legal issue, but it is the end result of some rights and legal issues, namely, once again, the family court. That's the perfect example. But obviously that isn't the only reason. It's complex. Now, it is true that MRAs are men's rights activists, but we don't talk just about legal rights. We talk about men's issues in general. So by saying that this isn't a rights issue doesn't mean that it's not a fucking issue. The vast majority of feminist talking points are not human rights issues. It goes on to say, the fact that women attempt suicide more often would indicate that female suicide is a more important problem. No, it doesn't. Once again, I have no problem with talking about people who attempt suicide, whether they be male or female or black or white or young or old or whatever. There is room for all those discussions. But when female suicide attempts are used in an attempt to shut down conversation about men dying, you are a fucking scumbag. So after my last video, some of you went over to Claudia's video and left comments, and Claudia responded to some of them. And I actually want to go through these comments and have a closer look and in turn respond to them. So Claudia starts out by saying, to be honest, I considered deleting this video, but it wouldn't really seem appropriate now that I just got called out on the inaccuracies in this video. I was actually made aware of a couple of the errors in this video at the time, but I left the video up mostly because there was a gap in my uploads, and I felt bad that I hadn't uploaded in ages. Yes, that's the much more important issue than spreading false information about men's issues and MRAs. Clearly, having a gap in your uploads is the far, far more important thing. Anyway, she goes on to say, I figured it might be worth keeping up in spite of some of the really stupid shit in this video. Yeah. Next. This is probably my least favourite video I've done. Yeah, I think there would be a lot of people that would agree with that, Claudia. She says, I did try to watch all of Bain's video, but I couldn't really get past him telling the audience constantly that I was deliberately misrepresenting data or that I had some agenda, when really it's that this video was shit and lazy. Well, did I say you had an agenda? I guess I did in a sense. I said I think your main purpose is to defend feminism no matter what, and I stand by that. Feminism über alles, right? Feminism over everything, even reality, even statistics, even men's issues, even men dying. And you don't like MRAs because we turn up and point at all the inconsistencies and falsehoods in feminism. So you react by defending your faith and attacking our issues, and in doing so, you misrepresented us, and you diminished and dismissed some pretty serious men's issues, which pissed off a lot of people, including myself. She goes on to say, if he had just asked me if I stood by the stuff in this video, or what made me take this approach, I could have told him I didn't actually agree with a lot of this shit anymore, and realized a lot of mistakes I made in this video. But instead, he assumed the worst of me, which has made it hard for me to watch the rest of what he has to say. Okay, there's a lot here to pick apart. And she says this a few times in her comments. If he had just come and asked me, I could have cleared up everything. Why the fuck should I, Claudia? Why the fuck should I come and ask you? You didn't come and ask a single MRA before making your video. You didn't ask us about our opinions on any of the topics you misrepresented. You didn't even fucking attempt to understand what our arguments were. You didn't give us the slightest bit of fucking consideration. So why the fuck should I do that to you? And yes, it is true that you don't stand by a lot of the statements, because they've been pointed out to you so many times that you would be an absolute idiot to stand by them. You have no choice but to admit that you fucked up. However, Claudia, if you were really concerned about fucking up, what you should have done is maybe taken down the video, or alternatively, put some annotations on the video, or maybe pinned a comment at the top of the comment section. Or done something like that. Maybe doing a response video, a follow-up video to correct your errors. But instead you did none of that, and you left the video up, and I assume that people continued watching it, and I assume that some of those people would have believed the misinformation that you presented. I think it's a pretty safe bet that these people didn't go through the 100 or so comments in your comment section looking for comments from you where you say, oh shit, I fucked up. You made no attempt to correct your mistake. Not in any way which was easily accessible in any case. So for the last 7 months, your video's been up, getting views and spreading false information. So I don't really care if you don't believe in this shit or not anymore. You're still spreading false information either way. But that's not really a big concern, is it? You just don't want to be thought of as a bad person. Being accurate, not really that much of a concern. Being thought of as a bad person, well, that actually does concern you, doesn't it? And if you think I'm being harsh, go back and watch your video and look at the way you dismiss men who have fucking died. Not only with the prostate cancer thing, but the suicide topic you brought up as well. I'm sorry, but I've got no sympathy for someone who makes such shit arguments. You're the one that pressed the publish button. You're the one that has to take responsibility for the information that you've put out there. That fucking simple. Next. I'm actually friends with David Charette, though, who watched the whole thing and basically summarized a few of the key points. And I do agree on a couple of things. It was because of David I even gave the video a chance. I did try, but honestly, I just feel like it's all too heated. Yeah, there's a good reason why it's heated. There is an exceptionally good reason why it's heated, Claudia. I'll give you a clue. Here's a couple of comments in my comment section from people who have lost loved ones to prostate cancer. They weren't too fond of your dismissal of men's issues and prostate cancer, and with good reason. Next. I'd like to try to talk to Bain, maybe directly, because maybe then if we spoke about this, he might know a lot of the errors in this video were just because this video was lazy, rushed, and I had no idea for content and took up an argument I don't even passionately hold. Yeah, well, I'm willing to accept that it was a lazy video, and also I would add that you're ignorant. And I know that sounds harsh, but it gets worse, trust me. My issue with you, Claudia, is you have this very toxic combination of being smug and ignorant. Now, those two things are bad enough by themselves, but when you put them together, it's not a good look. You were talking down to MRAs without even fucking understanding what our position was. And when you get caught out and corrected, you start making excuses. Now, once again, I give you credit for admitting that you fucked up, but you didn't really have much choice, did you? I mean, it was such a massive fuck up. You would have had to have been a complete idiot to double down. Mind you, I've seen people do that in the past. It always amazes me when they do that. But anyway, so let me give you a little bit of advice, Claudia. I'm a bit older than you. I've been around the block a few more times than you have. So I would advise taking this to heart. If you're going to be smug, make sure you're fucking correct. That simple. Because there's nothing worse than being smug and getting everything fucking wrong and ending up looking like a complete fucking idiot. If you're going to be smug, if you're going to talk down to a group of people, you better be fucking sure that every single thing you're saying is 100% correct. And you were the opposite of that, weren't you? Not the smug part, but the correct part. I think you were 100% wrong, if I'm to be honest. Next. Basically, one of my biggest regrets of this video is this who has it worse game. Yes, and unfortunately, that's Feminism 101, isn't it? As we just saw in the previous segment with the Rational Wiki, more women attempt suicide, then therefore that's the main issue, because, you know, living women is a bigger concern than dead men, apparently. But if you don't want to play the who has it worse game, Claudia, I would recommend giving up feminism and maybe becoming an egalitarian or something like that instead. Anyway, she goes on to say, I don't think it's productive to start making cancers into a competition over who has it worse. Yeah, strangely, a lot of my viewers would agree with that. I think that's why you pissed off so many people. Anyway, next. We should advocate for cancer treatments being affordable and available to everyone, and I absolutely think that prostate cancer should receive more awareness and funding. Yeah, I agree. Next. So this was a stupid argument to make because it flies in the face of that completely. Yeah, I once again would agree with you, Claudia. But I think the reason why you were making it is because of your feminism, is because women always have to have it worse, is because you didn't want to give MRAs the slightest bit of ground. You didn't want to admit that maybe men have an actual issue. Maybe men have it worse than women in some ways. Maybe men are discriminated against in some ways. Because, you know, that might justify the existence of MRAs, right? And MRAs disagree with feminism, therefore they're the bad guys. And you can't possibly justify the existence of the bad guys, can you? So I don't think it's that you don't give a shit about men dying of prostate cancer. I think it's more of the fact that you're just willing to do and say anything to defend your faith. Next. I feel like this video was partly contrarian shit and stuff I should have put more thought into. Yeah, once again, I think we all agree with you, Claudia. Next. Live and learn, though, I guess. Well, I would hope that's the case. I guess we'll see in time, won't we? Next. I am sorry I sent you a Bible over this. I just wanted to clear up a couple of things, since I think Bane fans got a very bad impression of what I was trying to do in this video. Yeah, I think we got a good idea of what you were doing, Claudia. I think it was very clear. Next. I do think there's non-sexist reasons for the funding gap, but my reasoning in this video was crap. So she's now about to once again diminish the funding gap because she can't possibly admit that there is discrimination against men because feminism. Now, admittedly, this excuse isn't as bad as the one in her video, but it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense, at least to me. I'll let you make up your own minds. She says, the real reason is prostate cancer is typically diagnosed in older men, and breast cancer is being diagnosed younger and younger, with many women in their 20s. So what? Let's assume that that's true. And someone responded to her comment pointing out that it wasn't in fact true, that the number of women getting breast cancer in their 20s is very, very small. But let's assume that Claudia's argument is 100% true. So what? The cancers are still very comparable, with a slightly higher number of males dying than females. It shouldn't matter if they're 40 or 20. Now, sure, you might argue that it's more tragic for someone to die in their 20s because they haven't lived as long, sure, but it's still people dying. I don't think it justifies the massive gap in funding. Anyway, she goes on to say, I still don't think this means that men shouldn't be checked or that prostate cancer doesn't matter. I just think that an explanation that isn't as stupid as the shit I said in this video, which I hope is clear, I don't stand by anymore. And funny enough, some MRAs got mad at me for saying I don't stand by my claims in this video, which, I mean, would they prefer I stick to ideas despite knowing that they are wrong? You mean like still defending the gap in funding, Claudia? Is that what you mean? So let's have a look at another comment she left. What I mean is that the disease will actually develop and be in men in their 40s, and so the reason why breast cancer has been prioritized is that more women are developing this in their 20s. I don't think that we should put prostate cancer on the back burner, so don't get me wrong. I would like to see more funding for all medicine and medical research, just generally. I was just saying I am not sure it's entirely due to sexism that there is a gap. Yeah, well, I would say it's largely due to female preference, and this is an example of a female issue getting more sympathy and attention than a male issue, a comparable male issue. She goes on to say, this isn't really about feminism as such. Well, it is, in the sense that feminists like to dismiss men's issues, as we see constantly. But anyway, she says, I'm just saying that the reason for this is that women are getting this disease younger than the average man gets prostate cancer. Yeah, but they both still end up dead, don't they? I hope this clears things up, but if you still hate me, then that's whatever. Okay, next comment. I imagine it's easier for YouTubers who can just hide behind, I'm playing a character, despite Claudia not being my real name. Claudia basically is me. Yeah, and Bane is basically me too. Next. Sure, I use a cartoon instead of my real face, but I am the person in my videos. So if I get criticism for shit I said in my video, then it's harder to separate that from me, the person. Well, I'm not sure it should be separated from you, the person, Claudia. You are responsible for the content on your channel. You are the one that made it. You are the one that pressed the publish button. You are the one responsible for it. There's no reason why it should be separated from you, the person. You upset a lot of people. You pissed off a lot of people. People have lost loved ones to suicide and prostate cancer. And seeing you do everything you can to diminish and dismiss these issues that pisses people off. You need to own that shit. Next. I also can appreciate that Bain has probably had some supremely stupid shit said to him by feminists who are malicious or don't mean well. So I can understand if he has a bad impression. I judge people by what they say and what they do, Claudia. Reasonable feminists I treat reasonably. I've got a long record of doing so. I've had reasonable conversations with reasonable people, even feminists. And I hope to continue doing that in the future. I'm not going to dismiss someone just because they wear the feminist label. However, if their arguments are shit, or if they treat feminism as if it's some kind of cult or religion, and they're willing to do anything to defend it, even go against common sense and fucking reality, or, more commonly, dismiss men's issues and MRAs, then yeah, sure, you're going to get fucking criticised. That simple. Make good arguments backed up with good evidence, and you won't be hearing from me. Make shitty arguments which diminish men's issues and ignore or disrespect men who have died, and yeah, you will get criticism, and you won't get an apology for it. Too bad. Next. I just have a pretty bad impression of MRAs since I've gotten a lot of hostility in the past. Yeah, I can't imagine why, Claudia. It's a mystery. You clearly, really care about men's issues, right? Next. But I still treat people as individuals. Yeah, right. Sure you do. Yeah, anyone who leaves a bad comment on one of your videos is automatically a card-carrying MRA, right? Am I right? I mean, the very first video I ever saw you in, you were calling some random guy at a fast food restaurant an MRA. I'm not exactly sure what men's rights issue he was advocating for. It's a little bit of a mystery, but I suspect that you've been doing exactly the same thing ever since. Anyone who disagrees with feminism in any way is an evil MRA, right? By all means, correct me if I'm wrong. But that's the impression I get, especially considering there are so many people like you doing exactly the same thing. It would be a lot harder to make actual arguments against MRAs if you just didn't class everyone you disliked as an MRA. So, next. Since this video, Lone Wolf actually reached out to me and changed my mind a bit on MRAs. He's pretty cool. Okay, well, good on him. Maybe, you should actually try talking to some MRAs and listening to our point of view for a change. The thing that you suggested that we do to feminists, even though we actually have always been doing that. But, yeah, don't let the facts get in the way. Next comment. Made it about 15 minutes in, but he's such an insulting twat that I just can't sit through it. She's talking about me. I will try my best to revisit it, but honestly, it just makes me mad. Not worth it. Yeah. I don't think I said anything in that video, Claudia, which comes anywhere near as insulting as your arguments against MRAs and diminishing and dismissing men's issues. Once again, talk to a couple of people in my comment section who have lost loved ones to prostate cancer or suicide. I get the feeling they would find your video far more offensive than anything I said, but maybe I'm wrong. Next. I visited this later because honestly, I had to just take a step back and realize what was bothering me. It was mostly because while I know this is a crap video, in fact, this is my least favourite video I've done, and I know that my claims got proven false, I actually admit it. I believe in the comments that the "in your ass" comment was stupid. Yeah. But you still left the video up anyway, right? Next. That was sort of meant to be a joke, but it really didn't seem like it because it was among serious arguments. Also joking about cancer, really, yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you that that joke wasn't particularly funny, Claudia. Next. Basically, it was just a stupid joke argument because I got a lot of negative feedback that my videos were too boring. Yeah, well, a good way to spice up a boring video is to, attack MRAs and joke about men dying of cancer. That will always liven things up a bit, right? Hashtag feminism. Next. I rushed this content out because I hadn't made a video in ages and I just wanted something out there. Not really an excuse though, is it? Next. I think I actually made this video in an afternoon, so really, given the complexity of something like cancer, I should have put more time into it. Yeah. Ironically, you criticize MRAs for not being factual, and that's kind of ironic, isn't it? Next. I had considered making a correction video, but given that this video seemed to just die off and be irrelevant, I didn't bother. A correction video would have been nice, or a pinned comment, or annotations, or something to show that you had made a mistake and correct it yourself, so future viewers, when they turned up, would see that correction, as opposed to potentially believing your fucking bullshit. Next. My problem is that Bain seemed to just assume I was malicious, pushing an evil narrative or something, which is about the harshest assumption to make. Yet once again, let me stress, what I think you're guilty of can be summed up as feminism über alles, or feminism over everything. Now, this is a common thing we see in feminists who often claim to care about men's issues in one breath, and then in the next breath they will diminish and dismiss those issues any fucking way they can. Because feminist ideology is built on the principle that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed, and women's issues are always far, far more important. So any time an evil man or an evil MRA points out that in this particular area men have it worse, the feminist has to somehow diminish or dismiss those men's issues as being less important or unimportant. Yeah, sure, men are dying of cancer, but, that cancer's only in their ass, right, Claudia? Sure, more men commit suicide, but you know what? What about the women who attempt it and fail? Surely they're more important, right, Claudia? This is something we see over and over and over again. Not just from Claudia, but also in this very episode from the Rational Wiki entry. We see it constantly. Sure, men have issues, but here's a long list of why they're really not that important, and we should be talking almost exclusively, if not exclusively, about women's issues. That's what you're guilty of, Claudia. You and the vast majority of other feminists, at least the vocal ones. Next. Really, the truth is that this video was lazy and ignorant. No argument from me there, Claudia. I admit that. If he had just come to me and asked me to clarify things, I could have just told him that. Yeah, I don't know why you expect special treatment, Claudia. You in no way came to any MRAs to ask us to clarify anything in your video. You just made assumptions about us and then proceeded to spread that misinformation. At least I knew your position when I made my video. You clearly didn't know ours, and probably still don't. Like I said earlier, smugness and ignorance are not a good combination. Now let me put forward a scenario. Let's say Claudia came across a video by someone who is clearly racist or holds racist opinions, offensive racist opinions. Let's say someone put out a video claiming that the brains of black people are half the size of white Europeans. Now, clearly this is false. But let's, for argument's sake, say that Claudia came across such a video and she decided that, this needed to be corrected. I have to ask the question, would she send a polite message to the person who made it, asking them to clarify their position because, maybe they've changed their mind since then. Maybe she's misunderstood what they said in the video. Or would she just make a response, pulling apart the arguments and showing evidence to support her position? I think we all know the answer. Next. He could go ahead and criticize it anyway. At least then, though, he wouldn't just blatantly accuse me of maliciously pushing an idea because I want men to die or some shit. I don't know. Okay, Claudia, could you please provide me a timestamp where I claim that you just want men to die? I'd really appreciate it if you could go through my video and find the exact moment and send me a timestamp of when I said that you want men to die, because I don't remember saying that. Now, I think there is a big difference between diminishing men's issues because feminism über alles and wanting men to die. I think those are two different things. Mind you, neither of them are particularly good, but one is far worse than the other, obviously. Next. I just thought the video was super uncharitable. Yes, Claudia, unlike yours, right? And it was hard to watch someone work from this base assumption that all of my motivations are deceptive and malicious, instead of just assuming that these are mistakes and ignorance. Yeah, once again, Claudia, smugness and ignorance. Bad combination. I don't think you want to kill men, okay? But I do think feminism über alles, right? That's your mantra. Next. I feel it's kind of unfair to someone to assume that their innocent statements are all the result of them being deceptive and malicious, when a lot of this was just ignorance. Yeah, and ironically, you accuse us of being ignorant, and you accuse us of not understanding the feminist position, and you accuse us of stereotyping all feminists, etc., etc., etc. All these things that you are guilty of, while being smug about it. Next. It doesn't help that a bunch of Bane fans have come here to call me names, some even telling me to go die, and the general ridiculous hostility. Okay, let me just give a message to anyone who watches any of my videos. Can I please encourage you not to go to someone's video and leave abusive or hostile comments? By all means, leave well-formulated arguments, okay? By all means, point out the faults in their videos. By all means, give them fair criticism, but don't be abusive. When you are abusive, you turn someone who has made bad arguments into a victim, and they suddenly can avoid the fair criticism and just focus on the abuse. So let's say, for argument's sake, 50 people went to a particular video and left well-formulated arguments pointing out all the faults in the video, and 5 people left slightly abusive comments. Maybe 1 or 2 of them were really abusive. I guarantee you that those 5 comments, which range from slightly abusive to really abusive, will become the focus, and not the 50 comments which have left actual fair criticism. So let me stress, don't go and help our opposition. Don't give them something to distract and derail the conversation. Now, having said that, I can understand that some people get pissed off. I can understand that some people may get really fucking pissed off at some of the fucking offensive and stupid shit which is said about us, a lot of which could easily be classed as hate speech. And I'm not talking about Claudia in particular, I'm talking about in general here. So I can understand people being pissed off. But, going to someone's video and telling them to fucking die doesn't help. Plus, we should at least try to have reasonable discussions. And some people are actually reachable. I've had numerous experiences where someone has made an offensive or an ignorant video, and I've left a comment, and they've actually come around. It does happen sometimes. And that's not going to happen if you tell someone they're a cunt and they should fucking die. So let me stress, please, don't leave those comments. Next. No wonder no one on the internet wants to admit to being wrong. Well, my advice, Claudia, would be to do whatever you can not to be wrong. Everyone makes mistakes from time to time. But what you should do before you press that publish button is do everything you can to make sure that you're as correct as possible, and that any mistakes you might make are small mistakes. And, correcting them with annotations or something like that wouldn't go astray either. Now, if you're talking about statistics, for example, and you say a statistic is 77%, when in fact it's really 75%, that's not a huge mistake. I don't think it really needs a correctional video or anything like that. However, if you say the stat is 77% and in reality it's 7%, a mistake of that size does need to be corrected. So there is a spectrum of being wrong, in other words. And you really should try to keep those mistakes to a minimum. And if you do make mistakes, then preferably they're the smaller ones that really don't matter that much. Next. Even after admitting fault and saying you were wrong, people still go fucking crazy at you. Yeah, maybe if you put annotations on the video, or a pinned comment, Claudia, or a correctional video, or you took it down. You can't expect people who come across your video to go through hundreds of comments to find the 1 or 2 comments by you where you admit that you're wrong. Most people won't do that. Most people don't read all the comments. Most people haven't seen you admitting that you're wrong, because you haven't really made any effort to show that you've admitted that you're wrong. Can't you get that? You're still spreading false information in the video. Next comment. Yeah, I get that. I just wish he was approaching this in a more charitable way, because I try to do that generally with others and I didn't do anything to him. Bullshit. You didn't do anything to me personally, but you most definitely did not approach the men's rights movement in any fucking charitable way. Not the slightest way, Claudia. You didn't take the time to understand our arguments. You didn't take your time to represent us in a charitable or accurate way. So, the fact that you think that we should do that to you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Claudia. Fuck off. Next. I get that he's probably a bit jaded, and maybe if he and I talked this over, we could see eye to eye. I was just pretty disappointed in the tone of his video and the suggestion that I was maliciously pushing an agenda and lying when it actually was a lazy, rushed video that turned out shit. Yeah, I think you started with the conclusion and then found the evidence to support that conclusion. I'm pretty sure I said that in the video. Now, do I think that you came across the correct information and then purposely left it out? No, I don't think you did that at all. I do, however, think that you didn't really try to find the truth. You just tried to find information that supported your position. Feminism, über alles, right? Anyway, that's it from Claudia. Let's finish up with some more rational wiki. Okay, let's get this last one out the way. I know the video's going to be running long today, so let's go through it as quickly as we can. Rational Wiki, healthcare and life expectancy. So, what they think the MRA argument is this. One of the odder MRA claims is that the health system is geared for women and against men. So that claim is odder, is it? Now, the strange thing about this is some of the evidence that they put forward in their rebuttal actually supports this odd MRA claim, as we will see. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's finish their summary of the MRA argument first. According to various statistics related to male health, life expectancy and suicide rates, men's medical issues are not given as much attention as women's health problems. Yes, that's what we're claiming, as we will see. It goes on to say, the word woman appears 134 times in the body of Obamacare. The word men appears twice in the body of Obamacare. And they finish it off with, oh my God, sarcastically. So, yes. You see what I mean, when I said earlier that large portions of this Rational Wiki article seem to have been written by a 14-year-old from Tumblr. But I would say that if women appear 134 times in the body of Obamacare and the word men appears twice, then maybe, just maybe, there is some kind of bias there. Maybe we should at least investigate that. But of course not. That's silly MRAs with their odd claims about female preference, which we know just doesn't exist anywhere in the world, does it? Yeah. Okay, so let's go on and read their rebuttal, which is a bizarre mix of weird claims and contradictory arguments. You're gonna love this. Healthcare costs for women are nearly twice that of men in the US. Now, I have to admit the US healthcare system is very strange to me as an outsider. For my American audience, you probably all understand it perfectly well and think that it's, normal. I guess it is normal to you. But it's weird to those who are outside the US. Aussies like myself, Canadians, New Zealanders, the people from the UK and numerous parts of Europe. We have a completely different system in which the government provides healthcare. So in that scenario, the government provides healthcare and pays for it through collecting tax. And which gender pays more tax, males or females? Well, the simple answer is males, because males typically work longer hours, they work jobs which typically pay more, so they typically earn more money, which means they also pay more tax. And who benefits more from that? Women, when it comes to healthcare and numerous other programs. Now, like I said, that may be a bit different in the US because there's a weird system where your employer pays for your healthcare. I don't really get it. It's strange to me, I admit. And to be honest, I don't know how Obamacare fits into that either, which seems to be an attempt to emulate the system we have, but I don't know how well it's done that. Anyway, let's continue. Prior to Obamacare, many states still allowed insurance companies to charge women more for the same coverage. However, this is because health insurance companies consider women greater risks than men because they consume more medical care. Well, that would seem fair, wouldn't it? If women on average consume more, then it makes sense that they would be paying more. I imagine in most cases the health insurance of a healthy 18-year-old isn't the same as, say, a 50-year-old with numerous medical conditions. But anyway, let's continue. Because they are largely in charge of reproductive control, women tend to visit doctors more often, and their health concerns are often caught before they become out of control. Well, I don't think that's the only reason. I think men are less likely to go to doctors in the first place, and women are more likely to go to doctors not just for reproductive reasons, but they're more willing to take care of their health, and that's a topic we should be talking about. It continues with, men's issues have historically been taken seriously, whereas women's issues often require a real fight to be acknowledged by the medical community. For example, the female Viagra wasn't approved until 2015. Yeah, it must have been the patriarchy holding that back. It's not the fact that males and females have different reproductive organs and therefore different drugs are needed to be developed. No, of course not. It's the patriarchy trying to oppress women by preventing them having female Viagra. I mean, sure, the companies could have made some money out of it, and we do live in a white, cis-normative capitalist patriarchy after all. I would think that a capitalist patriarchy would be wanting to make money off the women folk by selling them female Viagra, but apparently it's more interested in oppressing them. Of course, there's a very interesting counter-argument to this, and that is that we've had a female contraceptive for, over half a century now, and we still don't have a male contraceptive pill. Now, sure, you could argue that male and female biology is different when it comes to reproduction, but, hey, I'm going to follow the lead of the feminist writing the article for Rational Wiki and just conclude that it must be the matriarchy, right? Now, I was joking, obviously, but, there is a kernel of truth in that, because there are many feminists who are against a male contraceptive pill. Strangely. Next. Some issues that are usually viewed as men's problems, such as alcoholism, have been severely understudied in women. Until May of 2014, the US didn't even require pharmaceuticals be tested equally on female laboratory animals or human subjects. For fuck's sake. Yeah, I'm guessing if they used more female lab animals, that would have been the patriarchy oppressing female animals. And if you think I'm joking, I've heard those type of arguments before. I'm serious. There are some feminists out there who actually care more about female animals and the issues that they suffer under the patriarchy than male humans. Once again, I'm not joking. I am deadly serious. It continues. Although claims that this discrepancy in testing extended to human subjects were either outright lies or were done for obvious medical reasons, however, the idea that the healthcare system as a whole is biased against women is difficult to maintain in the face of women getting superior outcomes to men in many cases. So, that last sentence really contradicts everything that we've read so far. It is basically saying that it's hard to say that the system is biased against women when women get all the advantages from the healthcare system. Now, this leads me to believe that this rebuttal was written by more than one person, as we will see also later. But I checked out the citation, and it's a really interesting one. Now, it's already been a very long video, so I'm not going to go through the entire thing. Of course, I will link it below, as always, and I recommend you go have a look at it. But I really do need to look at a couple of key points in it, because it's really, really important for this article. Now, remember, this is a citation from their rebuttal against MRAs, because apparently this is one of the odder claims made by men's rights activists. Yet strangely, their citation supports this odd claim made by us. It links to an article which was originally published in 1994 called "The Sex Bias Myth in Medicine." Though it is commonly believed that American healthcare delivery and research benefit men at the expense of women, the truth appears to be exactly the opposite. Interesting. So like I said, I'm just going to read a couple of key paragraphs. So it starts by talking about President Bill Clinton, and it says, he and the First Lady had just hosted a reception for the National Breast Cancer Coalition, an advocacy group, after receiving a petition containing 2.6 million signatures which demanded increased funding for breast cancer prevention and treatment. While the Clintons met the leaders of the group in the East Room of the White House, 1,000 demonstrators rallied across the street in support. The president echoed their calls, decrying the neglect of medical care for women. Now it goes on to say a little bit later, perhaps the most emotionally charged disease for women is breast cancer. If a tumour devastated men on a similar scale, critics say, you mean like prostate cancer? We would declare a state of national emergency and launch a no-cost BARD Apollo Project-style program to cure it. Well, there is a cancer which is comparable, and there doesn't seem to be a no-cost BARD Apollo Project-style program to cure it. In fact, the opposite. In the words of Matilda Cuomo, the wife of the governor of New York, if we can send a woman to the moon, we can surely find a cure for breast cancer. The neglect of breast cancer research, we have been told, is both sexist and a national disgrace. Yes, well, I guess men are lucky that there isn't a comparable male cancer like prostate cancer. I guess we're just fortunate that such a thing doesn't exist. Now, it says a little bit later, in fact, one sex does appear to be favoured in the amount of attention devoted to its medical needs. In the United States, it is estimated that one sex spends twice as much money on healthcare as the other does. The NIH also spends twice as much money on research into the diseases specific to one sex as it does on research into those specific to the other. And only one sex has a section of the NIH devoted entirely to the study of diseases affecting it. That sex is not men, however, it is women. So it seems that the Rational Wiki citation actually supports the odd MRA argument completely. What a strange citation for them to use. Anyway, back to Rational Wiki. There is, however, a socially created reality that men do not go to the doctors as often or as soon as women do, and this often leads to finding problems late into the medical situation. Yeah, and maybe that's something we should be spending time talking about, right? It goes on to say, so instead of an easy prevention, say for example the onset of diabetes, depression or knee problems, which all can be mitigated, the patient requires more serious treatment. MRAs haven't explained how feminism has caused this. Why does feminism need to be the cause of it for it to be an issue? I don't understand. Can't it just be an issue? How exactly are we blaming feminists for this? Now, you could argue that feminists diminish and dismiss men's issues, like in this Rational Wiki article, for example, and you could argue that they successfully lobby for more funding for female issues or female health. But it's also a societal issue. And I wouldn't say feminism is the cause, I would say it is just a problem standing in the way, preventing us from doing more about it. Next. As for life expectancy, it is true that women currently live longer than men. Whether you're in Iran or Iceland, they still live longer. Why this occurs remains vague. Socio-economic factors has a part. Okay, so let's talk about these vague reasons why women typically live longer than men. It's not one thing, it's a whole host of different things. Men are more likely to commit suicide. Men are more likely to work dangerous jobs, which can get them killed. Men are more likely to work longer hours and stressful jobs, which, lead to health problems later in life, like heart attacks. Men are more likely to be victims of violence. Men are less likely to go to the doctor and get their health checked on a regular basis. Men are more likely to be homeless. There are numerous reasons why typically women live longer than men. Yet strangely, men in many places around the world are still required to work longer than women. The retirement age for many men is far later than many women, even though the men will die sooner. Strange that. But let's continue. Unfortunately, the difference isn't narrowing. In addition, it appears to have been a relatively recent phenomenon brought on by higher mortality caused by smoking and binge drinking, which have traditionally been male affairs. Yes, that's it. It's not the higher suicide rate or more likely to die at work or any of those other things that I mentioned. It's the fact that men smoke more and binge drink more. Now, admittedly, smoking and binge drinking doesn't help, but I don't think that they're the two main causes. And if they are the two main causes, then I expect the life expectancy gap will narrow in about 40 or 50 years, because there seems to be a lot of younger women who like binge drinking and smoking to excess. Anyway, let's continue. Prior to the demographic transition of the 19th and early 20th century, when death in childbirth and infectious disease were largely eliminated in the global north, men outlived women virtually everywhere in the world, sometimes by 5 or more years. And I'm not going to look it up because it's irrelevant, because we're talking about today. Anyway, let's continue. In the US, the NIH has budget items for women's health and violence against women, but no corresponding items for men's health or violence against men. Now, I would think that's an interesting thing to bring up, but apparently that's an odd argument. Next. This is certainly unfair, but does not imply that the healthcare system as a whole is unfair to men. Yeah, okay. So 2/3 of the funding is spent on women, and there's women-specific programs, and cancers that affect women are taken more seriously than those that affect men, but that doesn't mean that it's unfair towards men. No, of course not. Next. Indeed, that would be like a white person saying that the existence of the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Discrepancy somehow means the entire system is rigged against white people, even though the point of such an institute is to alleviate already existing healthcare inadequacies. Sorry, I found it difficult to read that without bursting out laughing. And I'm not saying that there aren't minorities who need special services because they might have special needs or they're underfunded in a particular area of healthcare. But that doesn't apply to women, okay? Essentially, what this person is arguing is women get 2/3 of the funding because women get a minority of the funding. And that doesn't make any sense. You can't have a majority and a minority at the same time. Next. As it stands, the healthcare system was designed with men in mind, while organisations have had to spring up in order for women's specific health concerns to keep pace. And while men and women commit equal levels of minor domestic violence against one another, severe domestic violence and domestic terrorism is still committed more against women. While a great deal of female-on-male violence seems to be self-defense. Ah, yes, of course. The typical feminist argument. whenever a man commits violence, it's because of toxic masculinity. But whenever a woman commits violence, well, it's not her fault, because women don't have any agency. We can blame toxic masculinity. She obviously did it in self-defense, right? Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is the next couple of sentences, which completely contradict what I just read. It says, however, most female-on-male violence is not in self-defense. A study of British heterosexuals found that only 21% of female-on-male domestic violence is in self-defense. Now, when I read that and I saw that it completely contradicted the previous bit, I thought there must have been a typo or something. So I checked the citation, and it is indeed an article on battered men, and it's no typo. So I'm thinking that there's been more than one person editing this entry. So just to sum up their argument, the rational wiki argument on domestic violence against men, the reason women do it is because they're doing it in self-defense, even though most of the time when women do it, they're not doing it in self-defense. And apparently there's no contradiction there. Okay. Moving on. Now, this last paragraph, I'm not going to bother reading because this video's already run over time. I'll put it on the screen. You can read it yourself if you want. Pause it, or you can click the link below and go to the Rational Wiki article. But I will briefly summarize it. It says one of the reasons why men don't live as long as women is because men have an XY chromosome, and there are specific genetic disorders that affect men because of this. Now, I'm willing to accept that that's true, but I don't think those specific genetic disorders are responsible for the vast majority of men not living as long as the vast majority of women, okay? The XY chromosome argument is obviously not as big an issue as male suicide, or men not going to the doctors, or men dying at work, or violence against men, or any of those other things I've mentioned in this section. So it's strange that they would devote an entire paragraph to that. I guess they're just clutching at straws, trying to come up with yet another way to say that, you know, it's not bias, it's, well, I guess the issue is men. I guess men are to blame because they're born with an XY chromosome instead of the superior double X. So we don't have to worry about getting men to go to the doctors, you know, and maybe doing some awareness campaigns or anything. We could just say, hey, you know, men are genetically fucked up, so let's not worry about it, right? What fucking bullshit. Anyway, I'm done.
Well, luckily, while I was making the Red Pill movie, I kept a video diary, which ended up tracking my evolving views. And in looking back on the 37 diaries I recorded that year, there was a common theme. I would often hear an innocent and valid point that a men's rights activist would make, but in my head, I would add on to their statement a sexist or anti-woman spin, assuming that's what they wanted to say but didn't. So here are two examples of how that would go. A men's rights activist, an MRA, would say to me, there are over 2,000 domestic violence shelters for women in the United States, but only one for men. Yet multiple reputable studies show that men are just as likely to be abused. I would hear them say, we don't need 2,000 shelters for women. They're all lying about being abused. It's all a scam. But in looking back on all the footage I'd gathered of men's rights activists talking about shelters, and all the blogs they've written, and the video live streams they posted on YouTube, they're not trying to defund women's shelters. Not at all. All they're saying is that men can be abused too, and they deserve care and compassion. Second example. a men's rights activist would say to me, "Where is justice for the man who was falsely accused of raping a woman? And because of this accusation, he loses his college scholarship and is branded with the inescapable title of rapist." I would hear them say, "A woman being raped isn't a big deal." It's as if I didn't hear the word falsely accused of rape. All I heard was he was accused of rape. Of course, rape is a big deal, and all the men's rights activists I met agreed it is a horrible thing to have happened to anyone. I eventually realized what they're saying is they're trying to add to the gender equality discussion who is standing up for the good-hearted, honorable man that loses his scholarship, his job, or worse yet, his children, because he's accused of something he absolutely did not do. Well, I couldn't keep denying the points they were making. There are real issues. But in my effort to avoid agreeing with my enemy completely, I changed from putting words in their mouth to acknowledging the issue, but insisting they are women's issues. So here are two examples of how that would go. A men's rights activist would say to me, "Men are far more likely to lose their child in a custody battle." And I would counter, "Well, because women are unfairly expected to be the caretaker, it's discrimination against women that women get custody more often." Yeah. I'm not proud of that. Second example, an MRA would say to me, "Men are roughly 78% of all suicides throughout the world." And I would counter with, "But women attempt suicide more often. So ha." Ha? It's not a contest, but I kept making it into one. Why couldn't I simply learn about men's issues and have compassion for male victims without jumping at the opportunity to insist that women are the real victims?